Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. F1's governing body continues to be an absolute shambles with two more senior figures sacked as of today. Tim Mayer is the key name involved today, a long-serving steward, apparently fired by text message over the last couple of days. He's been involved in some controversy recently over allegations of bias, given that he's related to a co-founder of McLaren, but the reason why he's fired, nothing to do with that at all. Rather, the main man, the president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, offended, apparently, by something that he said, therefore he sacked him. What's going on with this sport? Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. First of all, of course, it's the Qatar Grand Prix this weekend. This is the way the paddock looks so far. It's also the return of Formula 2. This may not be massively relevant, but it is worth just talking about. Of course, there's two more races at Qatar and then Abu Dhabi, but there's a sprint and a feature race on both weekends. Gabriel Bortoleto currently leads the championship. He's getting to drive at Sauber next year, alongside, of course, Nico Hülkenberg. Isaac Hadjar is in second place, but has rather squandered his lead over the last couple of rounds. He's in the picture for Red Bull. Zane Maloney is similar, actually a very talented driver, I think. Paul Aron started well but faded. Jack Crawford is maybe in the picture as an American driver for a Cadillac reserve drive in a couple of years' time. Then there's Antonelli, and the reality is Behrman isn't even here. So it goes to show that there isn't maybe that much correlation at times between the real talents in Formula 2 and those that actually end up winning it. There are drivers such as Colapinto that have done a great job in Formula 1 since coming in general, who was solid in Formula 2 but nothing special. Everyone who watches F2 knows the cars aren't really as equal as they say they are. The engines aren't really as equal as they say they are. And there are various reasons because, you know, Prema at the end of the day have really failed, dropped the ball on this transition here to the, new regulations in Formula 2, and Behrman is not even on here. Antonelli is, but we know that Behrman's done a great job every time he stepped into a Formula 1 car, and that seems set to continue at Haas next year. So it's plausible many of these other guys could also do a similar job. That's basically why Sauber had taken the chance on Bortoleto, and he's Brazilian. That helps as well. But the F2 campaign's going to conclude very shortly over the next couple of rounds. Colapinto is in the conversation, obviously, to get the seat at VCARB. This is far from guaranteed, but it's something worth considering. Red Bull are certainly considering it, and every single day there are more rumours that Colapinto to the Red Bull family is plausible. Rumour has it, I guess, that VCARB, as in the sister team, is the more likely destination. That makes sense. That apparently is Helmut Marko's plan, is to put Lawson into the Red Bull, replacing Perez, and then to bring Colapinto in alongside Tsunoda. The rumour was a few days ago now that Horner wants to do it the other way around, leave Lawson at RB, I guess, and kick out Perez and put Colapinto straight into the Red Bull. But I don't think they're going to do that, certainly because Colapinto over the last couple of rounds hasn't been quite as impressive. Tsunoda as well, he's still hoping, I guess, that Red Bull changed their minds. And honestly, as Yuki's got on and as he keeps delivering impressive results, he scored another couple of points in Las Vegas, finishing P9 in the end in the RB that started the weekend terribly. So another great drive from Yuki, outperformed Lawson all weekend as well, which was, probably expected, but nonetheless important for Yuki and also important for Liam in trying to get that drive over Perez. And Tsunoda, as more and more time passes, Yuki realizes that someone either doesn't like him or they're not happy with his temperament or whatever. I don't really know why Yuki won't even be close to being considered for the opportunity, but as time goes on, Yuki has obviously realized this and speaks with more and more ferocity, I would say, against the situation at Red Bull, which maybe some people at Red Bull would like, maybe the like of Helmut Marko, others maybe do not. But as Yuki says, he reckons the last couple of races of the season are going to be more important than the test, because after Abu Dhabi, he is going to do a tyre test in a Red Bull car, this year's RB20, which is potentially going to be very telling for Red Bull. That's certainly what they seem to want, is that Tsunoda in the Red Bull, they can compare his times to when Lawson has tested the car compared to when Perez has been in the car. And that might be useful. Whether it's enough to get Yuki the drive, I don't know. He'd have to do something pretty spectacular, I'd say, to make that happen. But, of course, he reckons that his final couple of rounds are going to be more important to that end anyway. And look, as Yuki then says, I'm sure if I was in the Red Bull seat, I can fight for a higher Constructors' Championship position, and that's what they want. But other things, politics, get in the way, I guess the implication is. They decide what they want. So I love Yuki's conclusion here. It's like, look, if you put me in the car, would be scoring more points in the Constructors and would be getting earning more money for the Constructors' Championship positioning, but politics or whatever are keeping me out. That's kind of the implication there, because I think Yuki probably knows that his chances of a Red Bull driver are highly limited indeed. This again, I did clarify this yesterday, but De Kester decides to do it again. Of course, he's closely connected to some sources at Ferrari. Zhou continues to talk about Ferrari being interested in him as a reserve driver, but De Kester says there's no chance of that, and his chances are 0%. It's going to be Giovinazzi and Arthur Leclerc. So apparently Zhou's going nowhere near Ferrari, but I guess time will tell. Bottas has already confirmed that there's been some discussions with General Motors, right? So 2026, they're coming in. It seems highly likely that it's going to be Colton Herta getting one of the drives. American driver drives for that team already over in IndyCar right now. It just makes a lot of sense for Herta to come in as long as he gets the, the prerequisite super license points over the next 12 months or so. And then they'd probably need a more experienced head. That could be a Ricciardo, that could be a Magnussen, that could well be a Bottas. So I think that's where some of the conversations are being had. But for now, Bottas is going to be Mercedes' reserve driver. We are 99% sure. And today they confirmed Mick Schumacher is gone. Chosen to leave his role, they say, which is, it's a generous way to put it, I think. I would say, obviously, it's been mutual, I would say, between the two parties, because, we can confirm that Mick has chosen to leave his role. Is like, has he really chosen to leave, or have they said, look, Mick, I think we're going to bring this partnership to an end. If you'd like to leave gracefully, then, maybe walk away before you're pushed or whatever. And then that's what they say publicly. It's been such an interesting time for Mick at Mercedes, right? Because he was part of that, Ferrari driver academy, then he became a part of Mercedes, and over the last couple of years, Toto has been pretty adamant that, yeah, Mick's a great racing driver, he's got to get a seat somewhere, this guy is the real deal. And then when Toto has a chance to put him in the car, he chooses an 18-year-old rookie Antonelli instead, which I think is the right decision. But, Toto's words and his actions on Mick haven't always been especially well aligned. We believe that Toto maybe tried to get Mick a drive at Williams. That never happens. And, Toto says Mick is first and foremost a racing driver and one that deserves to be competing in the very best championships. But that might end up being the last thing that Toto really has to say on Mick, because he's going to be leaving Mercedes. He does confirm that he's going to stay as part of the Alpine WEC adventure. That's what Mick confirmed today. But, his time as a Mercedes man and, strapped to the simulator, doing lap after lap in the early hours of the morning after Mercedes had messed up another Friday practice day, those times are over. So maybe Mick will be kind of looking forward to that. And I don't know what his next step's going to be, but him leaving Mercedes means that it opens the door, obviously, for Valtteri Bottas to step in. Before we talk about some of the FIA drama, of which there is a lot, there were some further reactions to Verstappen's comments after Las Vegas, having won the Drivers' Championship. Max, of course, had a couple of beers and then a couple of G&Ts and said, would I have won the World Championship in the McLaren? Absolutely, I would have done it. I'd won it a lot sooner too. In 2021, I'd have taken the title. In 2022, he says, would have been harder. Lando's given his thoughts on this, though, and says, that ain't possible. No way he would have won it earlier. I don't think, it's possible that Max could have won it, and of course, Lando could have won it in the McLaren. Lando, though, says it was no way possible that he could have won it earlier than the Red Bull did this season, given the lead, I guess, that he had. So I guess that's maybe a fair point, but I don't think Lando helps himself often. One day Lando will say, oh, Max is, great, top driver, so glad that he won. And then the next day, you're seeing Lando say, well, we were the fourth best team at the beginning of the year. Red Bull have never been the fourth best team, or worst, let's say, ever. We just had too big of a points deficit to catch up from the beginning of the season, and we could not do so because they've still been so strong. But I just don't know if I really buy this. I mean, I get it. I do understand what Lando's saying, and maybe on some level he's not necessarily completely wrong. But again, what I always say with Norris and McLaren is it's a mentality, right? This is a loser mentality, straight up, in my opinion. They're basically saying, oh, well, we had no chance to win anyway because our car wasn't good enough and Red Bull's was. We know, we look at the numbers, it was winnable. This season was winnable. After Miami, the points deficit Lando needed to overturn, he had 19 rounds to do it. Like, he just needed to outscore Max by 3 points a weekend over 19 races. I know that's far easier said than done, but you're telling me that Max couldn't have been outscored by 3 points a weekend over the most recent 19 races of the season. Like, it was absolutely doable. Even on weekends where McLaren weren't the best, there were options there. So, yeah, that's my opinion. You guys might think it's harsh, but, you know, I think it's fair. But intrigued to your thoughts on the comment. And obviously other drivers also were given their comments, because Max says, yeah, would I have won the championship in the McLaren even earlier? Would I have won it in the Ferrari? Pretty much the same, he says. And Leclerc says, bit of a stretch to say anything like that. So not quite the same comments that Norris gave, but it's been kind of fun to see the reaction here to the statement of Max after his 4th World Championship triumph. I'm not sure what Mercedes are cooking this weekend, but both of their drivers spotted in the white race suit. And this brings me back, you know, I love the white race suit from the Mercedes. I do miss it, actually. And this is Hamilton rocking up in it as well. I don't know if they've got some sort of special livery cooking. We know that they are going to have a special livery for Hamilton's final race in Abu Dhabi. I don't know if they've got anything planned this weekend in Qatar, but it would be kind of interesting if they do. But speaking of Qatar, these are your stewards for the weekends. Now, as many of you guys have realised, realistically, the stewards should probably just be the same every weekend and should be probably paid a relatively handsome fee to do so. That is not how it works on either front. There's a lot of volunteering even that goes on at this top level, and I find it remarkable how in Formula 1, in contrast to regular sports, in normal sports, people train their whole careers to be referees. They go through years, decades of training to become specifically to learn how to be a great referee. In Formula 1, it's like, oh, you used to race cars? Do you want to be a steward? You know, fill in some forms and off you go. And I know there's more to it than that, but and as Tim Mayer is about to describe, there are very few platinum level stewards that have passed all the relevant examinations. Tim Mayer was one, and now he's been sacked in, I would say, remarkable circumstances, but actually very predictable circumstances, I think it's got to be said. So Derek Warwick is back. Now, of course, over the last few weeks, there's been lots of talk about potential bias of stewards. Now, ideally, you'd never want to believe this could be a thing, but of course, you have to consider the possibility that it could be. Of course, Derek Warwick is kind of known for having this Honda dealership. Honda currently are working with Red Bull. In the future, they're going to be working with Aston Martin. So, you know, there's been some sort of theory on that. And then there's been the same stuff going around about Johnny Herbert, just because he's British. You know, people are saying he's biased towards the British drivers. And look, at the end of the day, you're never really going to know, and there's been decisions made over the last few rounds you can go either way on, and Johnny Herbert to the media said, don't know what you're talking about, like I'm not biased, and all this stuff, and it's obviously classic drama in F1. But this man at the top here, Tim Mayer, he also came into the conversation because he is the son of McLaren founder Teddy Mayer. So, of course, people have said, oh, well, you know, these decisions he's been making, because these were the stewards a couple of rounds ago, obviously favouring McLaren, and look, will Tim Mayer have some very small inherent bias towards McLaren because of that? Possibly, you know, I can't rule it out. But is he nonetheless basically one of the best stewards on paper who's done this job for so many a year for the FIA and has, you know, got all the accolades, I guess, to back that up? Yeah, that's also true. So I know some people are kind of celebrating today and saying, oh, well, you know, this McLaren bias guy is gone. Get rid of Johnny Herbert next, get rid of Derek Warwick next, or whatever. You're never really going to, you know, eliminate all of these problems. And at the end of the day, you know, like any stewards you bring in, they are going to be a certain nationality. Are they going to have a bias towards the drivers from their country? Possibly. Like, are we going to choose stewards of which there is no nationality of that team represented on the grid? It's impossible here to eliminate everything, I think is the point that I'm trying to make. But Tim Mayer has now been sacked, and not because there's been an investigation into the bias and they've decided that no, these stewards aren't being fair. Nothing, of course, of the sort of that. And whether that's fair or not, I don't know. But that's not the reason why this has been done. So Tim Mayer, like, you know, a top respected figure, like definitely a respected figure in the sport. He's been around for years doing this type of stuff, and he's been sacked, basically. In addition to Jeanette Tan, who's the Formula 2 race director. Now, there's another guy who was the Formula 2 race director. Jeanette Tan has replaced him because he is now race directing Formula 1 because Niels Wittich was fired just the other week as Formula 1's race director. Now we have a steward who's gone, and another race director who's gone. Now, after Niels Vitic was fired, he came out to the media and said, basically, they'd said, the FIA, that he had decided to leave. And he came out to the media and said, what are you talking about? I got sacked. So Tim Mayer was like, screw this. The FIA's a shambles. I'm just going to spill everything to the media. So he spoke in an exclusive interview to Andrew Benson and BBC Sports and said the following about, of course, Jeanette Tan, who's been fired as well. She is the epitome of the type of person we want working for the FIA, the best of the next generation of race directors. I don't know the circumstances, but one would think they'd work very hard to keep someone of her character. So then Rui Marquez, he's now going to have to do both. So a couple of weeks ago, he was just the F2 race director. Now they've sacked Niels Vitic, they've sacked Jeanette Tan. So that guy's now going to have to do both. The first time anyone's done that since Charlie Whiting. So that's a serious job, and Mayer says that puts him under incredible pressure. There are not a lot of platinum level FIA race directors, which is the FIA's highest level certification. I am one of them. It's a lot of work, and if you are doing the job right, you wake up every day with an ulcer thinking of all the various things that you need to be thinking about. He went on to say this: the FIA are not doing themselves any favours. They are literally running out of people to do those jobs. So race directorship and also stewarding. Now, he mentions on his own sacking and says, well, we'll discuss that in a second. Here he is in the bottom right-hand side. These are all the other guys, by the way, that have gone. We know that Vitic has gone. Sporting director Nielsen has gone. Technical director Tim Goss is gone. CEO Natalie Robin is gone. Deborah Mayer, gone. I mean, are we serious? This is absolutely insane. And then, of course, Mayer says, all right, how is he fired? Why is he fired? And he said the following. He even called out directly President Ben Sulayem over this whole swearing drama and says his view is the drivers need to be penalised for swearing, and what has happened since that reflects that. And he says there are times where he has directly involved himself with the stewards, making his views known, not with the stewards directly but via his staff. Part of the job of the stewards is to enforce the FIA's policy on the rules, so technically bad language is outlawed, so it's not unfair. Whether it's sensible to be chasing drivers for rather mild swearing is another matter. Goes on to kind of clarify that many of these drivers, especially for those which English is not their first language, you know, the words that Leclerc or Max or whatever said and got them into trouble is, you know, one of the first words you get taught in karting, right? So, and this is, I thought, was quite damning, really. There are other ways to handle that kind of thing unless your desire is to flex your muscles, which is seemingly what he thinks Ben Sulayem is up to. This is outrageous to me from what is meant to be a respectable institution, but is very difficult to maintain that image, I would say, right now. He was fired by a text message from one of Ben Sulayem's assistants. For a federation that relies on volunteers to fire by text somebody who has made a significant contribution does not speak well of the management of the federation. He said the reason for his dismissal, now this is remarkable to me, is that Ben Sulayem apparently took offence to the contents of an appeal document filed by the Circuit of the Americas, COTA, the host of the US Grand Prix. Now, the reason why this is all happening is because Mayer is a steward, but he also acts, and has done for the last 12 years or something, as the sporting director for a number of the US Grand Prix. So Mayer represented the Austin organisers in a right of review that they had because they got fined. We talked about this in a video a couple of weeks ago, very, very briefly. They were fined basically 500,000 euros for a track invasion at the end of the race. And they weren't happy about that because apparently in Canada the same thing happened, but they only got a warning. So COTA officials were not best pleased, and Mayer, who was acting in the appeal in his role as the sporting organiser of the 3 Grand Prix, said that his involvement in the appeal led to him being removed from the stewarding panel at Brazil, and they've now fired him for it. The official reason that will be given is they felt there was a conflict of interest with the FIA, as I had led the right of review in my role as organiser, but that is not why I was fired. Being an organiser is a role that I have fulfilled, benefiting the FIA for over 12 years. This is not new. In spite of the matter being resolved quietly and amicably, he is still upset and decided to fire me. After 15 years of volunteering my time as a steward, a decade teaching other stewards, and hundreds of hours volunteering in other roles, I got a text from one of his assistants letting him go. Mayer said that Ben Sulayem felt an element of the right of review paperwork was a personal attack on him. So basically, he was the sporting director for the Austin Grand Prix. The Austin Grand Prix organisers wanted to basically appeal the FIA's decision on a certain thing. Mayer therefore represented them against the FIA, I suppose, but it's not like he wrote the document, he just presented it. So, and one of the organisers, had presumably put in some sort of comment against Ben Sulayem, saying this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or whatever. And then Maya's job was then to present that to the FIA in the meeting, and obviously Maya hadn't written those words, but Ben Sulayem felt offended, or whatever, by the statement, and therefore apparently Maya was therefore the man to blame. And he says, there was no intention of trying to cause a problem with the FIA, and I will continue as the sporting organiser of these 3 Grand Prix. I think I said director, but a sporting organiser of the 3 US Grand Prix. This was such a minor point that it is baffling that anyone would take such offence. And then he goes on to clarify and says, in US legalese, that is synonymous with negligence, and which is problematic for a US corporate body. So following the right of things, some fans reached the track. They basically came to a decision on this. In the process, though, there were hurt feelings on behalf of the president, which I think is odd, because there was no cause for his feelings to be hurt when everyone else dealt with this in a professional manner. So what do we think about that? I mean, Tim Maya has been sacked and has decided just to tell everything and basically imply that Ben Sulayem's a terrible president to the FIA, which, to be honest, all the evidence points towards. So I think the conclusion is it's a total clown show right now at the FIA, and every single week at this point, we get further evidence of exactly that. What next? I don't know. There's only so many stewards and race directors you can fire before you're going to run out, and Ben Sulayem's probably going to take over the job himself. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.